I'd like to share with you my confession as an Agile project manager on celebrating my failures. The initial reaction to not doing well is probably not to call attention to areas where you have not succeeded. Human nature tends to divert attention away from the negative, but I'd like to share with you how I've found great success in celebrating my failures. There were a few times in my life when I've taken on more work obligations than I have the availability for. Important attributes of an Agile project manager include the ability to recognize your own areas of improvement, be able to self-reflect, and have the ability to admit your failures. Sometimes that means admitting that you may have actually failed the team. Leading by example and admitting this to the team ultimately promotes an honest environment, recognizing that there are a number of ways to fail, and we all do it. Okay, I'm about to talk about something that I'm not proud of, but it is an area of failure where you may not think that one could fail. This is a true story. There have been 3 separate instances in my life where I killed a cactus. Now if I admit that I killed a cactus, people seem quite perplexed. They ask how. How do you kill a cactus? As though they didn't know it was possible. I then have to explain that it happened not just once, not twice, but on 3 separate occasions. Well, I've given it a lot of thought and done some self-reflection as to the root cause. I received a cactus as a gift, and I loved this cactus. It wasn't that I didn't care. I was in college at the time, and I ended up moving, and I forgot to take my cactus with me. The first time, I attribute it to abandonment. After about a year or 2, I realized that I hadn't made anyone aware that I had left a cactus in my old room and that it needed watering. It ended up drying up. In fact, I had completely forgotten about it, and years later, I came back to find it pale, dry, utterly abandoned, and deceased. The second instance was due to neglect. I had bought a cactus and I did not want to make the same mistake again, so I placed it on a shelf of a bookcase in my living room. However, then I got busy, and I found myself watering it less and less until one day I realized that I had neglected it too long. It was right there, and yet I neglected it until it also perished. The third time I took a cactus under my care, I was determined not to let this happen again. Determined to prove that I could handle plant life. I would not let it be plagued by drought, so I watered it regularly. I gave it attention. However, I killed it by smothering it. Because of my over-nurturing, I hurt it in the end. I had put it in a fancy vase and took it to my desk at work. However, the fancy vase I selected did not have vents for draining the excess water. One day, I noticed that my cactus was beginning to sink in. It had become so waterlogged that it caved in from the insides. I'd like to take a quick moment of silence. So how does this apply to being an Agile project manager? Well, when I am approaching an area that could turn into failure, I try to stop, recognize familiar trends, admit my failure, and make the changes needed to continue in the best way for the team. I'd like to share with you a deeper look at an example where I began to go down that path of neglect again. I was recently working on a handful of projects, and I was stretched a bit thin. I was the project manager for one project, using a traditional approach, and a Scrum Master for other projects at the same time. One was with an experienced Scrum team, and another project team was fairly new to the framework and practices. I gave them an overview, and did my best to be available to them. But there were some times where meetings conflicted with my multiple projects, and I had to either try to move one, or pick which one to attend. My team seemed confident that they could self-organize and meet on their own, rather than delay the meeting for a few days from my availability. Being over-allocated, I was more than happy to accept the assistance. A few weeks later, I realized that the team was struggling, trying to do too much without guidance. Furthermore, I had trouble getting to some of the meetings on time, because the physical location was so far away from my other meetings. I learned a great tip from Matt Smith's improv session at the Orlando Scrum Gathering. One day, I was running particularly late. I walked into the planning meeting with the team, about 20 minutes late, threw both hands up in the air, and announced, "I have failed you. I've not been available, I'm late, I've neglected this project, and I'm sorry." The team looked up from their laptops with me standing there, with both hands still in the air, and they burst into laughter. I don't think anyone had announced or celebrated their failures in such a manner to them ever before. I told the team I was sorry for not having enough time for their project, and that I would specifically make a point to schedule time to meet with the team, step up, and facilitate more again. The bottom line is that I had neglected my Agile project. By admitting my failure and level setting what everyone was thinking, I was able to work with the team to get us back on track. I've had some great failures in seemingly impossible areas to fail, involving abandonment, neglect, smothering. In this early catch of neglect, my team appreciated and responded to my brutal honesty. I've realized that I need to recognize when I am stretched too thin. Trying to take on more work than I can handle will not yield the best result. The work may still carry on with appropriate team management, but you'll miss efficiencies. When it comes to severe cases of failure, making a mistake is only worthwhile if you learn from it the next time. The idea is that if I'm going to fail, I want to learn from my experience, identify the cause early on, announce my failure to the team, and work together moving forward. In this specific instance, we worked together to turn the project around, allowing the team to focus on their work and no longer having to cover for my absence. To continue on in the same manner, as though nothing was wrong, would have likely created a point of contention within the team, as I would have inevitably continued to fail them. I was able to recognize my failure, and celebrate it if you will, seal it off from the last sprint, and make the changes necessary to be more effective for the team moving forward. I had gotten caught up in not understanding my own limitations, and I neglected my Agile project. I am happy to say that we did turn the project around. I was able to pull on previous experience to recognize where I fell short. Having this revelation strengthened our team, and I learned to celebrate my failures for the greater good.